Instagram used to be my favorite way to unwind after work. I'd scroll through photos, chat with friends, and occasionally connect with new people. That's how I met him. His profile caught my eye. Great photos, similar interests, and he lived nearby. We started messaging and it felt like we clicked instantly. For weeks we chatted daily. He was funny, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We shared stories about our jobs, families, and dreams. I found myself constantly checking my phone, excited to see his latest message. It felt like I'd found someone special. After about a month of talking, he suggested we meet up. I was nervous, but thrilled. We decided on a local coffee shop, a place I knew well, always busy with a friendly atmosphere. It seemed perfect for a first meeting. The day of our date arrived. I spent extra time getting ready, wanting to make a good impression. As I drove to the coffee shop, my stomach was in knots. I kept imagining how our first face-to-face conversation would go. I arrived a few minutes early and found a table near the window. The cafe was buzzing with its usual weekend crowd. I ordered a latte and waited, my eyes darting to the door every time it opened. Then I saw him. At least I thought it was him. The man who walked in looked nothing like the photos I'd been admiring for weeks. He was easily 20 years older, with thinning gray hair and a heavy build. I felt a wave of confusion and disappointment. Surely this couldn't be him, but he walked straight towards me, a smile on his face that made my skin crawl. "Hey there," he said, his voice matching the one I'd imagined from our messages. "It's great to finally meet you." I sat frozen, unsure how to respond. He must have sensed my shock because he quickly launched into an explanation. He claimed the photos were old, that he'd been meaning to update them. But as he talked, all I could think about was how he'd deliberately deceived me for weeks. I managed to stammer out a few words, saying I was surprised by the difference. He brushed it off, changing the subject to how excited he was to meet me. But I couldn't focus on his words. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how to leave without causing a scene. After a few minutes of awkward conversation, I stood up, saying I needed to use the restroom. I thought it would give me a moment to collect myself and plan my exit. But as I moved to walk past him, he suddenly grabbed my arm. His grip was tight, much stronger than I expected. "Let's get out of here," he said, his tone no longer friendly. "My car's just outside." He started pulling me towards the door, ignoring my protests. Panic surged through me. I looked around desperately, but everyone seemed absorbed in their own conversations. I tried to pull away, but his grip only tightened. As we neared the door, I realized I had to act fast. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, I yanked my arm free and shoved him hard. He stumbled back, surprise replacing the confident smile he'd worn moments before. I didn't wait to see his reaction. I ran. I burst out of the coffee shop and sprinted down the street. I could hear him shouting behind me, but I didn't look back. My only thought was to put as much distance between us as possible. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like jelly. Finally, I ducked into a small bookstore, hiding behind a shelf of novels. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pull out my phone. I called a friend, my voice breaking as I asked her to come get me. As I waited, huddled in the back of the store, the reality of what had just happened hit me. I'd been so careful I thought I'd taken all the right precautions, but it had still gone horribly wrong. My friend arrived, concern etched on her face as she saw my state. On the drive home, I deleted my Instagram app, wanting to erase any connection to him. I thought that would be the end of it. But a few days later, I reinstalled the app to check a message from another friend. That's when I saw them, a flood of notifications from him, messages alternating between apologies and angry accusations. I blocked him immediately, my hand shaking as I navigated the app's settings. For a while, things were quiet. I started to relax, thinking maybe it was over. Then new messages started appearing from accounts I didn't recognize. At first, they seemed innocent, compliments on my photos or casual attempts at conversation. But soon I realized it was him, creating new profiles to bypass my blocks. The messages became more frequent, more unsettling. He'd comment on photos I'd posted, describing what I was wearing or where I'd been. It was clear he was watching my every move online. I changed my profile to private, but the damage was done. He'd already gathered so much information about my life. Each notification made my stomach churn. I'd jump every time my phone buzzed, afraid to see what new message had arrived. Sleep became difficult. I'd lie awake wondering if he was out there, if he'd try to find me in person again. I reported the accounts, changed my username, even considered deleting my profile altogether, but new messages always found their way through. It felt like he was always one step ahead, always finding a new way to reach me. Months passed, and the intensity of his stalking seemed to ebb and flow. Sometimes weeks would go by without incident, and I'd start to hope it was over. Then a new message would appear, shattering that illusion of safety. The last message I received from him was different. It wasn't a new account or a comment on a photo. Somehow, he'd gotten my phone number. The text was simple: "I'll see you soon." Those 4 words sent ice through my veins. I changed my number that day, finally severing the last connection he had to me. Hey there. Hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you do, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps the channel to grow and reach more people. And now. The sand was warm between my toes as I walked along the shoreline of Myrtle Beach. After months of overtime at work, I'd finally managed to take a week off for a much-needed vacation. The sound of the waves and the salty breeze felt like they were washing away all the stress I'd been carrying. I'd arrived at the beach earlier that day, checked into my hotel, and immediately headed for the ocean. The beach was busy but not overcrowded, with families and couples scattered along the shore. I found a quiet spot to set up my beach towel and spent the afternoon alternating between swimming in the refreshing water and lounging in the sun. As the day went on, I couldn't resist the urge to share my perfect beach day on social media. I pulled out my phone and snapped a selfie with the ocean in the background. My hair was messy from the wind and salt water, but I was grinning from ear to ear. I posted the photo to my Instagram story with the caption, "Finally on vacation," and a few beach-themed emojis. I put my phone away and went back to enjoying the beach, watching as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the water. Families started packing up their belongings, and the beach slowly grew quieter. I decided to take one last walk along the water before heading back to my hotel. As I strolled, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I figured it was probably a friend reacting to my beach photo, so I pulled it out to check. There was a notification for a direct message on Instagram from an account I didn't recognize. Curious, I opened it. The message contained a photo. At first glance, it looked similar to the selfie I had just posted, but as I looked closer, my stomach dropped. It wasn't my photo. This picture was taken from a distance, showing me sitting on my beach towel. In the image, I was looking down at my phone, likely the exact moment I had been posting my selfie. Below the photo was a message. "Enjoying your vacation? Send $500 to this account or I'll keep following you. This is just the beginning." My hands started shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. I spun around, scanning the beach frantically. Who had taken this photo? How long had they been watching me? The beach suddenly seemed much emptier than before, with only a few distant figures visible in either direction. I clutched my phone to my chest and hurried back to where I'd left my things. Every step felt like I was moving through molasses. My mind raced with questions and fears. Should I call the police? Would they even be able to do anything? How did this person find me? Back at my towel, I quickly gathered my belongings, constantly looking over my shoulder. Every person still on the beach became a potential threat. Was it the older man walking his dog? The group of teenagers laughing near the pier? The couple packing up their umbrella? I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me. I practically ran back to my hotel, not stopping until I was safely in my room with the door locked behind me. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The excitement and relaxation from earlier in the day had evaporated completely, replaced by a cold, creeping fear. I looked at the message again, hoping somehow I had misunderstood. But there it was, clear as day. The photo was undeniably of me, taken just hours ago. I zoomed in, trying to spot any clues in the background, but it was just an ordinary beach scene. For a moment, I considered paying the money. Maybe if I did, they would leave me alone. But a voice in the back of my mind warned me that giving in might only encourage them to demand more. Plus, I had no guarantee they would actually stop. I thought about calling the local police, but what would I tell them? I had no idea who this person was or where they were. For all I knew, they could have already left the beach. And would the police even take a threat via Instagram seriously? Sleep was out of the question. I spent the night pacing my hotel room, jumping at every sound in the hallway. I checked and rechecked that the door was locked, even pushing a chair against it for good measure. Every time I glanced out the window, I expected to see someone staring back at me. As the sun rose, I realized I had a decision to make. I could cut my vacation short and go home, but the thought of traveling while this unknown person potentially followed me was terrifying. On the other hand, staying meant living with the constant fear of being watched. I decided to stay, but my carefree beach vacation had turned into a nightmare. I couldn't bring myself to go back to the beach. Instead, I spent the day in crowded places, a busy shopping mall, a popular restaurant, places where I hoped it would be difficult for someone to follow or photograph me without being noticed. But nowhere felt safe. In the mall, every person looking at their phone seemed suspicious. Were they texting a friend or sending another photo of me to an accomplice? In the restaurant, I sat with my back to the wall, watching every patron who entered. I kept checking my Instagram, half expecting another message or photo, but there was nothing. Somehow the silence was even more unnerving. Were they still watching? Or had they moved on to torment someone else? As night fell, I returned to my hotel. The staff must have noticed my nervous behavior because the receptionist asked if everything was all right. I mumbled something about not feeling well and hurried to my room. I felt guilty for not telling anyone what was really going on, but I was embarrassed and scared that saying something might somehow make the situation worse. I barely slept that night, or the next. Each day, I went through the motions of a vacation, but it was all a pretense. I couldn't enjoy anything. The beautiful beach I had been so excited to visit now felt like an exposed, vulnerable space. I stayed away from it entirely. On my last day, I decided to face my fear. I needed to see the beach one last time, to not let this experience completely ruin my memory of this place. I went early in the morning, when the beach was nearly empty. As I stood there, watching the sunrise over the ocean, I felt a mix of emotions: lingering fear, anger at having my vacation ruined, and a sad determination to not let this unknown tormentor win. I took one last look at the ocean, then turned to leave. As I did, I saw a man standing a short distance away, his phone pointed in my direction. My heart raced as I quickly walked past him, not making eye contact. Was it just an innocent tourist taking photos of the sunrise? Or was it him? I'll never know for sure. I left the beach that day and haven't been back since. The rest of my journey home was a blur of paranoia, constantly checking over my shoulder at the airport and on the plane. Even as I arrived home, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Skincare has always been a big part of my routine. Every morning and night, I'd carefully cleanse, tone, and moisturize, hoping to keep my skin looking its best. But despite my efforts, I was never quite satisfied with the results. I'd try new products every few months, always hoping for that miracle cream that would finally give me the clear, glowing skin I wanted. That's when I saw the ad on Instagram. I was mindlessly scrolling through my feed when a video caught my eye. It showed a woman with skin like porcelain, talking about this amazing new product that had completely transformed her complexion. The before and after photos were stunning. In the before, her skin looked a lot like mine, uneven, with some acne scars and redness. But in the after, she looked like a different person. Her skin was flawless, almost glowing. I watched the video a few times, reading through the comments. People were raving about this product, saying it had worked wonders for them too. The price was a bit steep, but I figured it would be worth it if it really worked as well as everyone said. Plus, they were offering a special discount for first-time buyers. I clicked through to the website, which looked sleek and professional. There were more testimonials, scientific-sounding explanations of the ingredients, and promises of a money-back guarantee. It all seemed legitimate. I spent a few minutes browsing, then decided to take the plunge. I entered my credit card information and placed the order. For the next week, I eagerly checked my mailbox every day. When the package finally arrived, I was so excited I could barely wait to get inside and open it. The product came in a stylish, minimalist box. Inside was a small jar of cream that smelled faintly of lavender. The instructions said to apply a thin layer to clean skin every night before bed. That night, after my usual cleansing routine, I opened the jar. The cream was thick and luxurious, and it felt cool on my skin as I smoothed it over my face. There was a slight tingling sensation, which I took as a sign that it was working. I went to bed feeling optimistic, imagining waking up to noticeably improved skin. I woke up in the middle of the night with my face on fire. At first, I was disoriented, not sure what was happening. But as I became more awake, the pain intensified. It felt like my skin was being eaten away by acid. I stumbled to the bathroom and flipped on the light, then froze in horror at my reflection. My face was red and swollen, covered in angry-looking blisters. The skin around my eyes was so puffy I could barely see. Panic set in as I realized this wasn't just a bad reaction. Something was seriously wrong. I frantically splashed cold water on my face, trying to wash off any remaining product, but it only seemed to make the burning worse. I didn't know what to do. Should I call an ambulance? Go to the emergency room? I was scared and in pain, and I couldn't think straight. I ended up sitting on the bathroom floor, holding a cold, wet towel to my face and trying not to cry, because even my tears seemed to burn my skin. As the sun started to rise, I knew I needed help. My face felt tight and hot, and the blisters had started to ooze. I called in sick to work, then drove myself to the nearest urgent care center. The receptionist's eyes widened when she saw me, and I was taken back to see a doctor almost immediately. The doctor asked me a series of questions about what I'd put on my face. When I showed her the cream, she frowned and said she'd never heard of the brand. She diagnosed me with severe chemical burns and said I was lucky I hadn't gotten any of the product in my eyes. She prescribed some medication and gave me strict instructions for caring for my burns. Over the next few days, my face got worse before it got better. The blisters turned into open sores and my skin started to peel off in large patches. I couldn't leave the house, partly because of how I looked, but also because my face was too sensitive to be exposed to sunlight or wind. I had to call out of work for the rest of the week, using up all my sick days. During this time, I tried to contact the company I'd bought the cream from. I sent emails and direct messages on Instagram, explaining what had happened and asking for a refund. But my messages went unanswered. After a few days, I realized I'd been blocked on Instagram, and the website where I'd purchased the product was suddenly under maintenance. Frustrated and angry, I started searching online for more information about the company. That's when I found the horror stories. Hundreds of people had experienced similar reactions, some even worse than mine. There were entire forums dedicated to victims of this product, sharing their experiences and trying to warn others. I spent hours reading through these stories, feeling a mix of relief that I wasn't alone and terror at how widespread this problem was. Some people had been left with permanent scars. Others had racked up thousands of dollars in medical bills. And it seemed like no one had been able to get their money back or hold the company accountable. As the days passed, I had to keep going back to the doctor for checkups. My face was healing, but slowly. The doctor warned me that I might have scarring and that my skin would be extra sensitive for months to come. I had to completely overhaul my skincare routine, using only the gentlest products recommended by my doctor. The financial impact was significant. Between the cost of the product itself, the medical bills, and the lost wages from missing work, I was out hundreds of dollars, and that didn't even account for the emotional toll. Every time I looked in the mirror, I was reminded of my mistake. I felt stupid for falling for what now seemed like such an obvious scam. Weeks passed, and slowly, my skin started to heal. The open sores closed up, the redness faded, and the swelling went down. But my face didn't look the same. There were patches where the skin texture had changed, and I had a few small but noticeable scars. I kept hoping for some kind of resolution, an apology from the company, a refund, anything. But as time went on, it became clear that wasn't going to happen. The Instagram account that had originally advertised the product disappeared. The website never came back online. It was like the whole thing had never existed. The worst part was knowing that even as my ordeal was ending, other people were probably falling for the same scam. I thought about all the glowing reviews I'd seen, wondering how many were real and how many were fake. I thought about how easy it had been to convince me to buy a product I knew nothing about, just because it looked good on social media. In the end, I was left with a hard-learned lesson about the dangers of buying skincare products from unknown sources online. What I thought would be a simple purchase to improve my appearance turned into a nightmare that affected every aspect of my life for weeks. The experience changed not just my skin, but my whole approach to what I put on my body and how I evaluate products online. Money was tight, and I was scrolling through Instagram trying to distract myself from the pile of bills on my kitchen table. That's when I saw it, an ad promising a risk-free investment opportunity. The page looked professional, with thousands of followers and dozens of glowing testimonials. Something about it caught my eye, and before I knew it, I was tapping through their posts. The more I looked, the more intrigued I became. There were screenshots of huge payouts, videos of people excitedly talking about their returns, and detailed explanations of their investment strategy. It all seemed so legitimate, so tempting. I found myself imagining what I could do with that kind of money. Pay off my debts, maybe even take a vacation for the first time in years. I hesitated for a moment before following the page. As soon as I did, I received a direct message welcoming me and offering more information. The person on the other end was friendly and enthusiastic, asking about my financial goals and explaining how their system worked. They made it sound so simple, so foolproof. Over the next few days, the messages kept coming. Every time I opened Instagram, there was another notification. They sent me more screenshots of successful trades, testimonials from satisfied customers, even links to news articles about the booming cryptocurrency market. It was overwhelming, but also exciting. I felt like I was being let in on a secret that could change my life. I had questions, of course. I asked about the risks, about how they could guarantee returns, about what would happen if the market crashed. For every question, they had an answer that sounded reasonable and reassuring. They explained their proprietary algorithm and their team of expert traders. They talked about market trends and economic indicators in a way that made me feel like I was learning something valuable. Still, I was hesitant. I'd always been cautious with money, and this felt too good to be true, but they were persistent. They offered to show me live videos of trades being made to prove that everything was above board. I watched, fascinated, as numbers flickered across the screen and profits seemingly appeared out of nowhere. The pressure to invest grew. They told me about limited time offers, about how spots in their program were filling up fast. They painted a picture of missed opportunities, of other people getting rich while I sat on the sidelines. It was subtle but effective. I found myself checking their page more and more often, afraid I might miss out on something big. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I sat down and really thought about it. I looked at my bank account, at the small amount of savings I'd managed to scrape together over the years. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. The idea of doubling it in just a week was almost too tempting to resist. I messaged the account, telling them I was interested but still unsure. They immediately responded with enthusiasm, offering to walk me through the process step by step. They sent me detailed instructions on how to transfer the money, assuring me that their system was secure and that my investment would be protected. With shaking hands, I followed their instructions. I transferred every cent of my savings, watching the numbers in my bank account drop to almost nothing. As soon as the transfer was complete, they sent me a confirmation message, along with a timeline for when I could expect to see returns. The next week was a roller coaster of emotions. I oscillated between excitement and anxiety, checking my phone constantly for updates. They sent me regular messages, keeping me informed about market trends and assuring me that everything was going according to plan. As the day of the promised payout approached, my anticipation grew. I started making plans for the money, thinking about how I'd celebrate when it came through. The night before, I could barely sleep, my mind racing with possibilities. When I woke up the next morning, I immediately reached for my phone, expecting to see a notification about my payout, but there was nothing. I refreshed my email, checked my bank account, looked for messages, still nothing. A knot began to form in my stomach. I sent a message to the account asking for an update. Minutes passed, then hours, with no response. I kept refreshing the page, hoping to see those 3 dots that would indicate they were typing a reply. But there was nothing but silence. As the day wore on, my anxiety turned to panic. I sent more messages, each one more urgent than the last. I commented on their posts. I tried to call the number they had given me, but it was disconnected. The knot in my stomach tightened as the realization began to dawn on me. In desperation, I went to their Instagram page, hoping to find some explanation or reassurance. But when I clicked on the link, my heart sank. The page was gone. Not just inactive, but completely deleted. It was as if it had never existed. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, trying every possible way to contact them. I searched for their website, looked for other social media accounts, even tried to trace the bank account I had sent the money to. But at every turn, I hit a dead end. It was like chasing a ghost. As night fell, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my phone. The same table where just a week ago I had been worrying about bills. Now those worries seemed trivial compared to the crushing weight of what had just happened. My savings were gone, vanished into thin air along with the promises of easy money and financial freedom. The reality of the situation hit me like a physical blow. I had fallen for a scam, had been manipulated and deceived. All those messages, those videos, those testimonials, they were all fake, all part of an elaborate lie designed to separate me from my money. I looked at my bank account one last time, hoping against hope that it had all been some kind of mistake. But the balance stared back at me, unchanged and unforgiving. My money was gone, and with it my sense of security and trust. In just 1 week, I had gone from hopeful to hopeless, all because I believed in a promise that was too good to be true. I was sitting on my couch, mindlessly checking Facebook on my phone after a long day at work. As I scrolled through the usual mix of memes and status updates, a notification popped up, a friend request. I almost swiped it away without looking, but then the name caught my eye. It was my sister's name. My sister had passed away 2 years ago. The shock of seeing her name made me freeze. I stared at the notification, trying to make sense of it. It had to be a mistake, right? Some kind of glitch in Facebook's system. I tapped on the notification, half expecting it to disappear or show an error message, but it didn't. There was her profile picture, the same one she'd had when she died. Her smiling face looked back at me from my screen. I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't even begin to sort out. Confusion, disbelief, a hint of hope that maybe, somehow, this was really her. I knew it couldn't be. We'd turned her Facebook profile into a memorial page after she died. It was supposed to be frozen, untouchable, but here it was, sending me a friend request as if nothing had changed. My finger hovered over the accept button. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I'd never seen it. But curiosity got the better of me. I told myself I was just going to check it out, see what was going on. Maybe someone in the family had decided to reactivate her account for some reason. I tapped accept and held my breath. Immediately, I was taken to her profile page. At first glance, everything looked normal. Her old posts were still there, the memories and photos we'd all shared after she passed. But then I noticed something odd. There was a new post at the top of her feed. It was a family photo from years ago. My sister, our parents, and me at a backyard barbecue. I remembered that day clearly. It was the summer before she got sick. We were all laughing, caught in a candid moment of happiness, but I didn't remember ever seeing this particular photo before. The caption read, "Missing these days. Love you all so much." The post was time-stamped just a few minutes ago. I felt a chill run through me. This wasn't possible. I scrolled down and saw more recent posts, all made within the last hour. Old family photos I'd never seen, status updates that sounded just like her. As I was trying to process what I was seeing, a message notification popped up. It was from her account. My hands were shaking as I opened it. "Hey little bro, long time no talk. How have you been?" I stared at the message, unable to comprehend what was happening. It sounded exactly like her, the way she used to text me, the little nickname she always used. But it couldn't be her. I knew that. Yet here was this message, as if she'd just decided to check in after a long silence. More messages started coming in rapid succession. "Remember that time we snuck out to go to that concert? Mom was so mad. I found that old stuffed bear you gave me for my 10th birthday, still have it. We should plan a family reunion soon. I miss everyone so much." Each message felt like a punch to the gut. They were full of personal details, memories only my sister would know. But mixed in were strange comments, things that didn't quite fit. She mentioned our cousin's new baby, a child that had been born a year after she died. She talked about movies that had come out after her passing as if she'd seen them. I couldn't bring myself to respond. I just sat there, watching the messages pour in, feeling a mix of grief and horror. It was like she was right there, talking to me, but twisted and wrong in a way I couldn't quite put my finger on. Then I noticed something else. She was tagging family members in these old photos she was posting. I could see comments appearing from confused relatives. My aunt asking how this was possible. My cousin expressing shock and disbelief. It wasn't just me experiencing this. It was happening to our whole family. My phone started ringing. It was my mom. I almost didn't answer, not sure what I could even say to her about this, but I knew I had to. As soon as I picked up, I could hear the distress in her voice. She was seeing it too. The posts, the messages. She was distraught, alternating between confusion and a desperate hope that somehow, impossibly, it really was my sister reaching out to us. I tried to calm her down, to rationalize what was happening. But how do you rationalize something like this? We were both at a loss, trying to make sense of the impossible. While I was on the phone with my mom, more notifications kept coming in. Friend requests sent to other family members, posts appearing on relatives' walls. It was like my sister's account had come to life, reaching out in every direction. I ended the call with my mom, promising to try to figure out what was going on. But I felt helpless. What could I do? I couldn't bring myself to message the account back, but I couldn't look away either. I kept scrolling through the posts, reading the messages, looking for some clue as to what was really happening. That's when I noticed something odd in one of the photos. It was supposed to be a picture from a family vacation we took when I was a teenager. I remembered the trip clearly. It was the last big vacation we all took together before my sister got sick. But there was something off about the image. The background didn't look quite right, and my sister's face, it was her, but not exactly as I remembered her looking on that trip. I zoomed in on the photo, scrutinizing every detail, and then I saw it. The photo had been edited, subtly, skillfully, but unmistakably altered. Someone had taken an old family photo and changed it, inserting my sister's face from another picture. The realization hit me like a wave. This wasn't my sister. It wasn't a miracle or a ghost or some cosmic glitch. Someone was doing this deliberately. Someone had hacked into her memorial account and was using it to... what? Torment us? Play some sick game? I felt sick to my stomach. All those personal details in the messages. Whoever was doing this must have gone through all of my sister's old posts, piecing together information about our family. They were using our memories, our grief, to manipulate us. I immediately started messaging family members, trying to warn them about what was happening. But the damage was already done. I could see the confusion and pain playing out in real time as relatives commented on the posts, unsure whether to believe or deny what they were seeing. The account was still active, still posting and messaging. But now that I knew the truth, each new notification felt like a violation. This person, this stranger, was rifling through our most personal memories, pretending to be someone we'd lost, someone we loved. I reported the account to Facebook, but I knew it would take time for them to review it and take action. In the meantime, the imposter was free to continue this cruel charade. The posts kept coming, becoming more frequent, more insistent. The messages became almost frantic, begging family members to respond, to engage. It was like watching a performance spiral out of control, the actor behind my sister's digital mask becoming more desperate to maintain the illusion. As the night wore on, my phone buzzed constantly with calls and messages from family members. Some were angry, demanding to know who was behind this. Others were heartbroken, the false hope they'd felt giving way to fresh grief. And some were still unsure, clinging to the impossible idea that it really could be her. I stayed up all night, watching helplessly as this digital ghost of my sister haunted my family. There was nothing I could do to stop it. No way to protect the people I loved from this invisible attacker who had turned our memories into weapons against us. By the time the sun came up, the account had gone quiet. Whether the person behind it had grown tired or had finally been shut down by Facebook, I didn't know. But the damage was done. In just one night, our family had been torn apart, our grief reopened and exploited by someone we would never know or understand. The account disappeared as suddenly as it had reappeared, leaving behind a trail of confusion, pain, and violated memories. We were left to pick up the pieces, to try to make sense of what had happened and why. But some questions don't have answers, and some wounds don't heal cleanly. All we knew was that for one night the ghost of my sister had walked among us, leaving us forever changed by its passing. Social media had always been a part of my daily routine. Scrolling through Instagram, liking posts, following fitness influencers, it was just something I did without much thought. I'd been feeling a bit down about my appearance lately, so when I saw an ad for a fitness challenge pop up on my feed, it caught my attention. The challenge promised amazing results in just 12 weeks. The before and after photos were impressive, and the testimonials seemed genuine. I hesitated for a moment, thinking about all the diets and workout plans I'd tried before, but something about this one felt different. The coach looked professional, and the program seemed well structured. Before I knew it, I was filling out the application form. Within a day, I received a message from the coach. He welcomed me to the program and sent over a detailed meal plan and workout schedule. I was excited to get started. The first week was tough, but I was determined to stick with it. I followed the meal plan religiously and pushed through the workouts even when my muscles screamed in protest. At the end of the first week, the coach asked for an update. I told him about my progress, mentioning that I felt a bit sore but motivated. That's when he first brought up progress photos. He said it was important to document the journey visually, to stay motivated and track changes. It made sense, so I agreed. I took a few photos in my workout clothes, nothing too revealing, and sent them over. The coach responded with enthusiasm, praising my dedication and pointing out areas where he could already see improvement. His words gave me a boost of confidence, and I threw myself into the second week with renewed energy. As the weeks went by, I started to notice real changes in my body. My clothes fit differently, and I had more energy throughout the day. The coach continued to be supportive, always ready with a word of encouragement or a tip to push through a plateau. But I also noticed that his requests for progress photos were becoming more frequent. At first, it was just weekly photos. Then he started asking for midweek updates. The poses he suggested became more specific, always with the explanation that it would help him better assess my progress and adjust the program accordingly. I felt a bit uncomfortable at times, but I reminded myself that this was a professional fitness coach. This was probably normal in the industry. One day, about halfway through the challenge, the coach messaged me saying he needed more detailed photos to really see my progress. He asked for photos in workout shorts and a sports bra from multiple angles. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the send button. But then I thought about how far I'd come. how much better I felt. I didn't want to jeopardize my progress by not following the program completely. So I took the photos and sent them. The coach's response was overwhelmingly positive. He said I was one of his star clients, that my progress was inspiring. He even suggested that I might have potential as a fitness model if I wanted to pursue that path. His words made me feel proud and confident. For the first time in years, I felt good about my body. As we entered the final weeks of the challenge, the photo requests became even more frequent. The coach said we needed to document every little change as we approached the finish line. By this point, I was so focused on reaching my goals that I barely questioned it. I trusted the process, trusted the coach. The challenge ended with amazing results. I'd lost weight, gained muscle, and felt better than I had in years. The coach congratulated me and said he'd be putting together a final progress collage to celebrate my achievement. I was on top of the world. Then, about a week after the challenge ended, I received a strange message on Instagram. It was from someone I didn't know, complimenting me on my fitness journey. I was confused. My account was private, and I hadn't posted any of my progress photos publicly. I asked the person where they had seen my photos. Their response made my blood run cold. They sent me a link saying they'd seen my photos on an adult website. With shaking hands, I clicked on the link. What I saw made me feel sick to my stomach. There, on the screen, were my progress photos. All of them. From the first week to the last, including the more revealing ones from the later stages of the challenge. They were arranged in a collage, just like the coach had mentioned, but this was no celebration of fitness. The website was clearly adult-oriented, with my photos posted under a crude headline. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. These were private photos, meant only for my fitness journey. How did they end up here? In a panic, I tried to contact the coach. But when I went to his Instagram profile, it was gone. His website was down. It was like he had vanished into thin air. That's when the horrible reality started to sink in. This person I had trusted, who I had allowed into my life and my fitness journey, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I spent the next few hours in a daze, searching the internet for my photos. To my horror, I found them on multiple websites. Some had even been edited or photoshopped, making them even more revealing than the originals. I felt violated, exposed, and utterly helpless. I tried contacting the websites, demanding they take down my photos. Some ignored me completely. Others asked for proof that the photos were mine and that I hadn't consented to their posting. How was I supposed to prove that? I didn't even want to send them more photos of myself. As the day wore on, the reality of the situation truly hit me. These photos were out there, visible to anyone who stumbled across them. Friends, family, co-workers, anyone could potentially see them. The fitness journey that had made me feel so empowered now left me feeling more vulnerable than ever. I reported the original Instagram account to the platform, but I knew that was just a drop in the ocean. The damage was already done. My photos were out there, being shared and viewed without my consent. The coach, the person I had trusted with my progress, my insecurities, and ultimately my body, had disappeared, leaving me to deal with the aftermath of his betrayal. As night fell, I was still at my computer, desperately trying to get my photos removed from various websites. But for every site that took them down, it seemed two more popped up hosting them. It was like fighting a hydra. Cut off one head, and two more appear. The reality of the situation was overwhelming. What had started as a simple desire to get fit had turned into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My privacy had been invaded, my trust betrayed, and my body exposed without my consent. And the worst part was, I didn't know how far it would spread or how long it would take to contain. The fitness challenge that was supposed to change my life for the better had indeed changed it, but in ways I could never have imagined. As I sat there staring at my computer screen, I realized that this was just the beginning of a long, uphill battle to reclaim my privacy and my peace of mind. It was during one of these casual scrolling sessions that I received a message that would change everything. The notification popped up, and I saw it was from someone I didn't recognize. Curious, I opened it. The message was from a man claiming to be my long-lost cousin. He said he'd been searching for our side of the family for years and had finally found me through a mutual connection. At first, I was skeptical. I mean, who wouldn't be? But as I read through his message, things started to add up. He mentioned my grandparents' names and even the small town where my mom grew up. It was information that wasn't readily available online. I felt a mix of excitement and caution as I replied, asking for more details about our supposed family connection. Over the next few days, we exchanged messages frequently. He shared stories about our family that seemed to align with what I knew. He even sent a few old photos that included people who looked remarkably like my relatives. With each message, my doubts began to fade. The idea of connecting with a part of my family I never knew existed was thrilling. As weeks turned into months, our conversations deepened. We shared more personal stories, discussed family history, and even talked about our current lives. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, always asking thoughtful questions about my life and experiences. I found myself opening up more and more, sharing details about my childhood, my current job, and my hopes for the future. One day he mentioned that he had been going through some old family documents and had found some interesting information. He asked if I knew anything about our great-grandfather's military service or the family's old property in another state. I didn't, but I was intrigued. I spent hours digging through old photo albums and boxes of documents in my attic, looking for anything that might shed light on these family mysteries. As I searched, I came across documents I'd never seen before. Old deeds, birth certificates, even my parents' marriage license. I took photos of everything and sent them to my cousin, excited to share these pieces of our family history. He was thrilled, saying how valuable this information was in piecing together our family tree. Our conversations continued, and I felt like I was really getting to know this newfound family member. We even started making plans to meet in person. He suggested coming to visit me, as he was planning a business trip to my city in a few months. I was excited at the prospect of finally meeting face to face. Then one morning I woke up to a flurry of notifications on my phone. There were several emails from my bank about suspicious activity on my account. My heart raced as I logged in to check. To my horror, I saw multiple transactions I didn't recognize. Large purchases at electronics stores, transfers to accounts I'd never heard of. Panicking, I called my bank immediately. As I spoke with the representative, more details emerged. Someone had applied for several credit cards in my name. They had all the information they needed: my full name, date of birth, social security number, even my mother's maiden name. The representative asked if I had recently lost my wallet or had my personal information compromised in any way. That's when it hit me. The realization washed over me like a wave of ice water. All those family documents I'd shared, all those personal stories and details I'd divulged over the past few months, they weren't going to a long-lost cousin. They were going to a scammer who had meticulously crafted this elaborate ruse to steal my identity. With shaking hands, I opened Instagram to confront my cousin. But his profile was gone, vanished without a trace. I searched for his name, tried to find any trace of him online, but it was as if he'd never existed. The photos he'd shared, the stories he'd told, it had all been a carefully constructed lie. I spent the next few hours in a daze, making call after call. Credit card companies, credit bureaus, the police. With each conversation, the extent of the damage became clearer. My credit score, which I'd worked so hard to build, had plummeted. There were loans taken out in my name that I knew nothing about. The scammer had even attempted to access my retirement accounts. As I sat there, surrounded by the paperwork from all these calls, the full weight of what had happened crashed down on me. This person, this stranger I had welcomed into my life as family, had systematically dismantled my financial security. They had taken advantage of my trust, my desire for connection, and used it against me in the cruelest way possible. The documents I had so excitedly shared, thinking I was piecing together my family history, had instead given this scammer everything they needed to assume my identity. Every personal story, Every detail about my life had been carefully collected and used to answer security questions and bypass safeguards. I thought about all the times I had hesitated before sharing something, that tiny voice in the back of my mind suggesting caution. But each time, I had pushed it aside, convinced by the warmth and seeming genuineness of my cousin's interest. Now those moments of hesitation came back to haunt me, sharp reminders of the red flags I had ignored. The police officer I spoke to was sympathetic but not optimistic. He explained that these kinds of scams were increasingly common and often difficult to trace. The scammer had likely used multiple layers of false identities and untraceable accounts. The chances of finding them, let alone recovering my money or undoing the damage to my credit, were slim. As night fell, I found myself still at my computer, combing through months of conversations, looking for clues I might have missed. Each message now read differently, sinister undertones evident where I had once seen only friendly interest. The photos that had seemed so convincing now looked suspect, likely doctored or stolen from real family albums found online. The extent of the scammer's patience and planning was staggering. They had spent months gaining my trust, never rushing, never pushing too hard for information. They had crafted a persona so believable, so tailored to appeal to me, that I had willingly handed over the keys to my identity. I thought about all the plans I had made, the future I had been working towards, my dreams of buying a house, of starting my own business. All of it now seemed impossibly distant. The road ahead, of rebuilding my credit and reclaiming my identity, stretched out long and daunting before me. The night wore on, and I found myself unable to sleep, my mind racing with all that had happened. The sense of violation was overwhelming. This person had not just stolen my money and my identity. They had stolen my sense of trust, my belief in the goodness of people. The idea that someone could spend months pretending to be family, all for the sake of a scam, shook me to my core. As the first light of dawn began to creep through my windows, I sat there, surrounded by the evidence of this massive breach of trust. My phone, once a source of connection and joy, now felt like a portal through which my life had been invaded. The social media accounts I had enjoyed now seemed like vulnerabilities, weak points in the armor of my privacy. The reality of what had happened, of how thoroughly I had been deceived, was almost too much to bear. This wasn't just a financial crime. It was a profound betrayal, one that had shaken my faith in human connection. The person I had grown to care for, to think of as family, had never existed, and in their place, they had left a wreckage of debt, damaged credit, and broken trust. Landing a new job is always exciting, especially when you've been searching for months. After weeks of interviews and anxious waiting, I finally got the offer I'd been hoping for. It was a step up in my career, with better pay and opportunities for growth. Naturally, I wanted to share this achievement with my friends and followers on Instagram. I crafted a post, carefully choosing a professional-looking photo of myself and writing a caption about my new role and how thrilled I was to start this new chapter. I even mentioned the company's name, proud to be associated with such a well-known brand. The likes and comments started pouring in almost immediately. Friends and family congratulated me, and I basked in the warm glow of their support. Among the flood of notifications, one comment stood out. It was from a follower I didn't know well. Someone who had been following me for a while, but we'd never really interacted. Their profile picture showed a friendly face, and their comment seemed genuinely enthusiastic about my new job. They asked what I'd be doing and expressed how impressed they were with the company. I replied, thanking them for their kind words and briefly explaining my new role. I thought that would be the end of it, but a few minutes later I received a direct message from this follower. They congratulated me again, and then asked if they could send flowers to my new workplace to celebrate my achievement. It seemed like such a kind gesture, and I was touched by their thoughtfulness. For a moment I hesitated. Sharing my new work address with someone I didn't really know felt a bit odd. But then I reasoned with myself. What harm could come from it? This person had been following me for months, always liking my posts and occasionally leaving nice comments. Plus, they were just sending flowers. It wasn't like they were asking for personal information or anything sensitive. so I thanked them for their generosity and provided the company's address. They responded with a series of excited emojis and said they couldn't wait for me to receive their gift. I went to bed that night feeling on top of the world, excited about my new job and touched by the kindness of strangers on the internet. The next morning, I woke up early, eager to start my first day. I spent extra time getting ready, wanting to make a good first impression. As I drove to the office, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nervousness. I kept reminding myself that I was qualified for this job, that they chose me for a reason. When I arrived at the office, the receptionist greeted me warmly. She already knew who I was and directed me to the HR department to complete some paperwork. Everything was going smoothly. My new colleagues were friendly, showing me around the office and helping me get set up at my new desk. I was just starting to feel settled when things took an unexpected turn. I was in the middle of a conversation with my new supervisor when I noticed some commotion near the reception area. At first, I didn't think much of it, maybe a delivery or a visitor who didn't have an appointment. But then I heard my name being called, loudly and insistently. The voice wasn't familiar and it didn't sound like someone from the office. My supervisor noticed my distraction and asked if everything was all right. I mumbled something about not being sure and excused myself to see what was going on. As I approached the reception area, I saw a person I didn't recognize holding a large bouquet of flowers. It took me a moment to realize it was the Instagram follower who had offered to send flowers. But something was very wrong. They weren't just there to deliver flowers. They were agitated, demanding to see me, claiming to be my partner. The receptionist looked confused and uncomfortable, trying to explain that personal visitors weren't allowed without prior arrangement. I stood there, frozen as the situation unfolded before me. The followers spotted me and their whole demeanor changed. They smiled widely, as if we were old friends reuniting. They started walking towards me, arms outstretched, still clutching the flowers. I instinctively took a step back, my mind racing to make sense of what was happening. This person, who I had never met in real life, was acting as if we were in an intimate relationship. I managed to find my voice and told them that there must be some misunderstanding. I explained loudly enough for everyone to hear that I didn't know this person, that they were just someone who followed me on Instagram, but they wouldn't listen. They kept insisting that we were together, that they were there to surprise me on my first day of work. By this point, a small crowd had gathered. My new colleagues were watching with a mix of confusion and concern. I could see my supervisor approaching, a worried look on his face. The follower was getting more agitated, their voice rising as they demanded that I stop pretending not to know them. Security was called. As we waited for them to arrive, the followers' behavior became more erratic. They started talking about our supposed relationship, mentioning details from my Instagram posts, as if they were shared experiences between us. It was clear that they had built an entire fantasy relationship in their mind, using the glimpses of my life I had shared online. When security arrived, the follower resisted. They clung to the flowers, refusing to leave, insisting that there was a mistake. It took 2 security guards to finally escort them out of the building. As they were led away, they kept calling out to me, saying they would wait for me, that they knew I would come to my senses. In the aftermath, I stood there, shaking. The flowers lay scattered on the floor, a reminder of how quickly things had spiraled out of control. My supervisor gently led me to a quiet room, asking if I was okay and if I needed anything. I could barely form coherent sentences, still trying to process what had just happened. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I had to explain the situation multiple times, to HR, to my supervisor, to the security team. They were all supportive, assuring me that it wasn't my fault and that they would take measures to ensure my safety. But I couldn't shake the feeling of violation. This person had taken the small pieces of my life I had shared online and twisted them into something unrecognizable. As I left the office that evening, I couldn't help but look over my shoulder, half expecting to see the follower waiting for me. Instagram has always been my go-to app for killing time. I'd spend hours scrolling through my feed, liking posts and watching stories. It was during one of these mindless scrolling sessions that I came across a giveaway that caught my eye. A popular tech influencer I'd been following for months was hosting a massive giveaway to celebrate reaching 1 million followers. The prize was tempting, the latest smartphone model that had just hit the market. I'd been eyeing it for weeks, but with my current financial situation, it was way out of my budget. The giveaway seemed like the perfect opportunity to get my hands on it without breaking the bank. The rules were simple. Like the post, follow the account, and tag 3 friends in the comments. I did all that without hesitation. As I tagged my friends, I noticed the post already had thousands of comments. The chances of winning seemed slim, but I figured it was worth a shot. Days passed and I almost forgot about the giveaway. Then one evening, as I was cooking dinner, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a direct message from the influencer's account. My heart raced as I opened it, hardly daring to believe what I was seeing. The message congratulated me on winning the giveaway. I read the message over and over, making sure I wasn't misunderstanding anything. It was real. I had actually won. The message explained that I needed to confirm my shipping details and pay a small fee for express delivery to receive my prize. The fee seemed reasonable, especially considering the value of the smartphone I was about to receive. Without thinking twice, I replied with my shipping information. The next message contained instructions for paying the shipping fee. They asked for my credit card details, assuring me that it was a secure transaction. A small voice in the back of my mind questioned whether this was the usual way to handle such things, but my excitement overshadowed any doubts. I entered my credit card information, double-checking each digit to make sure it was correct. As soon as I hit send, a wave of anticipation washed over me. The influencer's account responded quickly, confirming that the payment was received and that my prize would be shipped soon. The next few days were filled with excitement. I kept checking my phone for shipping updates, but none came. I told myself to be patient. After all, these things could take time. A week passed, and still no updates. I decided to reach out to the influencer's account for more information. My message went unanswered. I tried again the next day and the day after that. Still nothing. The excitement I had felt began to morph into unease. I started to wonder if something had gone wrong with the shipping process. It was a Tuesday morning when everything fell apart. I woke up to a barrage of notifications from my bank. Confused and still half asleep, I opened the app to see what was going on. As the screen loaded, I felt the blood drain from my face. There were multiple transactions I didn't recognize, large purchases from online stores I'd never heard of, transfers to unknown accounts. In a panic, I tried to log into my online banking, but my password didn't work. I called the bank's customer service line, my hands shaking as I navigated through the automated system. When I finally got through to a representative, their words confirmed my worst fears. My account had been compromised. The representative walked me through the list of unauthorized transactions. With each item, I felt more and more nauseous. The total amount stolen was more than I made in 3 months. How could this have happened? Then it hit me. The giveaway, the shipping fee, the credit card information I had so willingly provided. I explained the situation to the bank representative, my voice cracking as I recounted the details of the giveaway. They listened patiently, then informed me that this was a common scam. The influencer account had likely been hacked or was a convincing fake. The giveaway was nothing more than a ploy to get people's financial information. As the representative spoke, I opened Instagram and went to the influencer's profile. The giveaway post was gone. In fact, all recent posts were gone. The account looked abandoned. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead as the full extent of what had happened sank in. The bank representative explained that they would freeze my account to prevent any further unauthorized transactions. They would investigate the fraud, but warned me that recovering the stolen money might be difficult, if not impossible. I listened numbly, barely able to process what I was hearing. After hanging up, I sat on my bed, staring blankly at my phone. The device that had once been a source of entertainment and connection now felt like a betrayal. I thought about all the personal information I had shared so freely on social media, my likes, my location, details about my life. It had never occurred to me that someone could use that information against me in such a devastating way. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, making call after call, credit card companies, credit bureaus, the police. With each conversation, the reality of my situation became clearer and more terrifying. My credit score, which I had worked so hard to build, had plummeted. There were loans taken out in my name that I knew nothing about. The scammers had even attempted to open new credit cards using my information. As evening approached, I found myself back on my phone, scrolling through Instagram almost on autopilot. The app that had been such a big part of my daily routine now felt alien and dangerous. I came across posts from friends, sharing their own experiences with online scams and warning others to be careful. It was too late for me, but maybe my story could prevent someone else from falling into the same trap. I looked at my own profile, with its carefully curated posts and stories. How much of that information had the scammers used to make their scheme more convincing? How many other people had fallen for similar scams, lured in by the promise of free gifts and exclusive deals? The sun was setting outside my window as I made one final call to my bank. The representative on the line informed me that more unauthorized transactions had been attempted, but thankfully blocked. However, the full extent of the damage was still unknown. They couldn't tell me when or if I would regain access to my account, or what would happen to the money that had been stolen. Buying my first house was a dream come true. After years of saving and countless viewings, I finally found the perfect place. It was a modest 2-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. The day I got the keys, I felt on top of the world. I remember standing in front of the house, clutching those keys, feeling the weight of them in my hand. They represented so much more than just access to a building. They were the key to my future, my independence. In my excitement, I did what most people my age do when something good happens. I shared it on social media. I took a photo of the keys in my hand, with my new home blurred in the background. I posted it on Instagram with a caption about achieving my dreams and starting a new chapter. The likes and comments started pouring in almost immediately. Friends, family, and even some acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years were congratulating me. It felt good to share my joy with others. The first week in my new home was a whirlwind of unpacking, arranging furniture, and settling in. I was exhausted but happy. Each night, I'd fall into bed, surrounded by boxes but feeling content. By the end of the week, I had finally unpacked enough to feel like I was really living there, not just camping out in a sea of cardboard. On that fateful day, I left for work just like any other morning. I remember locking the door behind me, jiggling the handle to make sure it was secure, a habit I'd developed since becoming a homeowner. The workday was uneventful, filled with the usual meetings and tasks. I even stayed a bit late to finish up a project, eager to impress in my new role at the company. As I drove home that evening, I was looking forward to a quiet night in. I'd planned to order takeout and binge-watch a new series I'd been wanting to start. I pulled into my driveway, noticing how the setting sun cast long shadows across my front lawn. It was a peaceful scene, one that still gave me a thrill of ownership. But as I approached my front door, something felt off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first. The door looked the same as always, but there was a stillness in the air that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I inserted my key into the lock, half expecting it not to work, but it turned smoothly as always. I pushed the door open, and that's when my world tilted on its axis. The entryway, which I'd carefully decorated with a small table and a framed mirror, was in disarray. The table was overturned, and the mirror lay shattered on the floor, reflecting fragments of the chaos around it. For a moment, I stood frozen in the doorway, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. Then, as if in a trance, I stepped inside. The further I went into the house, the worse it got. The living room looked like a tornado had torn through it. Couch cushions were strewn about, drawers pulled out and emptied, and my belongings scattered across the floor. I moved from room to room, each one revealing a new level of violation. In the kitchen, cabinet doors hung open, their contents spilled onto the counters and floor. My bedroom was the worst. The mattress had been pulled off the bed frame, my clothes ripped from hangers and tossed around like confetti. Even the framed photos on my nightstand had been smashed, shards of glass mixing with the mess on the floor. As the reality of the situation sank in, I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone to call the police. The dispatcher's calm voice was a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding me. She assured me that officers would be there soon and advised me not to touch anything. While I waited for the police to arrive, I stood in the middle of my ransacked living room, afraid to touch anything, afraid to even sit down. Every creak and groan of the house made me jump. I kept glancing at the front door, half expecting the intruders to return at any moment. When the police finally arrived, their presence brought a small measure of relief. 2 officers entered, their eyes scanning the destruction with professional detachment. They asked me questions about when I'd left for work, if I'd noticed anything unusual when I returned, if I had any enemies or disgruntled acquaintances. As they examined the house, one of the officers pointed out something that sent a chill down my spine. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no damaged locks. It was as if the intruders had simply unlocked the door and walked in. That's when the pieces started falling into place. The officer asked if I'd given anyone else a key or if any copies had been made. I shook my head, my mouth dry. Then, like a bolt of lightning, the realization struck me. The Instagram post, the photo of my keys. I explained to the officers about the social media post, my voice shaking as I spoke. They exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. One of them explained that skilled thieves can duplicate keys from clear photos, especially with the high-quality cameras on modern smartphones. My innocent celebration had given them everything they needed. As the officers continued their investigation, I wandered through my home, trying to take stock of what was missing. My laptop was gone, along with my tablet and the small amount of cash I'd kept in a drawer. The jewelry box that had belonged to my grandmother was empty, its contents, more sentimental than valuable, now in the hands of strangers. But it wasn't just the missing items that bothered me. It was the invasion of my space, the violation of my safety. Every room held evidence of strangers' hands rifling through my most personal belongings. They had walked where I walked, touched what I touched, seen parts of my life that weren't meant for anyone else's eyes. The police finished their initial investigation, taking photos and dusting for fingerprints. They told me they'd file a report and be in touch if they found anything. As they prepared to leave, one of the officers paused. He looked at me with a mix of sympathy and seriousness and said something I'll never forget. He told me that in today's world we often share too much without thinking about the consequences. What seems like an innocent post can give criminals all the information they need. It was just a normal part of my day, scrolling through my Instagram feed during my lunch break or before bed. I never imagined it could turn into something so terrifying. It started with a notification, a message from my ex. We hadn't spoken in months, not since the breakup. I opened it thinking maybe they wanted to return some of my things, but what I read made my stomach twist. It was a threat, vague but unsettling. They said they were watching me, that they knew where I lived, where I worked. I told myself they were just trying to scare me, that it was all talk. I blocked their account immediately. For a few days, everything seemed normal again. I went about my routine, work, gym, home. But then another message popped up from a different account. The profile picture was blank, but I knew it was them. The message was more specific this time, mentioning places I'd been recently, places I'd posted about on my Instagram stories. I blocked this new account too, but they kept coming. New profiles, new messages, each one more threatening than the last. They described what I was wearing on certain days, who I was with. It was like they were always watching, always one step behind me. I started to feel paranoid every time I left my apartment. I'd catch myself looking over my shoulder, scanning faces in the crowd for my ex. I changed my Instagram to private, removed any personal information from my bio. But it didn't stop. Somehow they always found a way to reach me. I considered deleting my account entirely, but it felt like admitting defeat, like letting them win. So I held on, hoping it would eventually stop. Then one day, as I was leaving work, I saw them. My ex was standing across the street just watching me. Our eyes met, and I froze. They didn't approach me, didn't say anything. Just stood there, staring. My coworker asked if I was okay, and I snapped out of it. By the time I looked back, my ex was gone. But the image of them standing there, watching me, was burned into my mind. I went to the police station that evening. I showed them the messages, told them about seeing my ex outside my workplace. The officer listened, took some notes, but in the end, there wasn't much they could do. The messages weren't explicitly threatening harm, they said, and a person standing on a public street isn't illegal. They told me to document everything and come back if anything more concrete happened. I left the station feeling defeated. That night, I double-checked all my locks before going to bed. I barely slept, jumping at every little noise. The next morning, I was exhausted, but I had to go to work. As I walked to my car, I noticed something on the windshield. It was a note, handwritten. "I'm always watching," it said. I looked around frantically, but the street was empty. At work, I couldn't focus. Every time someone walked past my desk, I flinched. My boss noticed and asked if everything was okay. I lied, said I wasn't feeling well. I didn't want to explain, didn't want to seem paranoid. But I was. Every ping from my phone made me jump. Every stranger on the street became a potential threat. I started changing my routines. I'd leave for work at different times, take different routes. I stopped posting on social media entirely. But it didn't matter. Somehow they always seemed to know where I was. The messages kept coming, each one more detailed than the last. One night I was home alone, trying to distract myself with a movie. There was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw them. My ex, standing in the hallway of my apartment building. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding. They knocked again, harder this time. I called the police, whispering my address to the dispatcher. The knocking stopped, but I could hear breathing on the other side of the door. I sat there in silence, waiting for the police to arrive. When the officers got there, my ex was gone, but they had left something behind. A small box outside my door. Inside was a lock of hair. My hair. I knew then that this wasn't going to stop. The police took a report, said they'd increase patrols in the area. But we all knew it wasn't enough. I couldn't sleep that night, or the next. Every sound made me think they were back trying to get in. I started missing work, too afraid to leave my apartment. But staying home wasn't any better. I felt trapped, like the walls were closing in on me. The final straw came when I got a call from my mom. She asked if I was okay, said someone had called her pretending to be me, asking for personal information. That's when I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. They were reaching out to my family, my friends. The thought of them being in danger because of me was too much to bear. I made the decision that night. I had to leave. I couldn't live like this anymore, constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid of my own shadow. I packed a bag with essentials, withdrew as much cash as I could from the ATM. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I couldn't risk them finding out. In the early hours of the morning, I left my apartment for the last time. As I drove out of the city, watching the familiar streets fade away in my rearview mirror, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. I didn't know where I was going, only that it had to be far away from here. Hours later, I crossed the state line. The sun was rising, casting a golden glow over the unfamiliar landscape. I pulled into a small town I'd never heard of before, found a cheap motel, and checked in under a fake name. As I sat on the bed in that anonymous room, the reality of what had happened, of what I'd been forced to do, finally hit me. I was safe for now, but at what cost? I was scrolling through Instagram one evening looking for new recipes to try. That's when I stumbled upon this local food influencer's account. Their posts were all about foraging for ingredients in the wild and creating unique dishes. It was different from the usual food content I saw, and I was immediately intrigued. This influencer wasn't some big-name celebrity chef. They were just a regular person from my area who seemed passionate about exploring nature and cooking. Their posts showed them wandering through nearby forests, identifying plants and mushrooms, and then turning them into mouth-watering meals. It all looked so adventurous and delicious. I spent hours going through their feed, fascinated by the idea of finding free, natural ingredients right in my own backyard. They made it seem so easy and safe. There were posts about edible flowers, wild berries, and various herbs. But what really caught my eye were the mushroom recipes. One post in particular stood out. It was about foraging for wild mushrooms in our local area. The influencer described a specific type of mushroom that was supposed to be abundant this time of year. They showed pictures of what to look for: the cap shape, the stem, the gills underneath. They even pointed out key features to distinguish it from similar-looking but inedible varieties. The recipe they shared looked amazing: a creamy wild mushroom pasta. I could almost taste it through the screen. And the best part? They said these mushrooms could be found in the wooded area just outside our town. I decided right then that I wanted to try this. The next day was Saturday, perfect for a foraging adventure. I woke up early, excited about the prospect of finding my own ingredients. I packed a small bag with water, snacks, and a container for the mushrooms. I also took screenshots of the influencers' posts about mushroom identification, just to be sure I got it right. The woods were quiet when I arrived, just a few joggers and dog walkers around. I ventured deeper into the trees, away from the main paths. The ground was damp from recent rain and the air smelled earthy. It felt like I was on a real adventure, even though I was just a few miles from home. At first, I didn't see any mushrooms that matched the description, but after about an hour of searching, I spotted a cluster growing near the base of an old oak tree. My heart raced with excitement. They looked exactly like the ones in the influencers' photos. The same brownish cap, the same stem thickness, even the same gill pattern underneath. I carefully picked a handful, making sure to leave plenty behind as the influencer had advised. It felt almost magical, like I was uncovering a secret feast that nature had hidden just for me. I couldn't wait to get home and start cooking. Back in my kitchen, I laid out the mushrooms on the counter. They looked so rustic and beautiful, nothing like the perfectly uniform ones you get at the supermarket. I carefully cleaned them, following the influencer's instructions to brush off dirt rather than washing them. As I prepared the other ingredients for the pasta dish, I felt a sense of pride. This wasn't just another meal. I had foraged for it myself. The recipe was simple enough. Sauté the chopped mushrooms with garlic and herbs, add cream and parmesan, then toss with pasta. The smell that filled my kitchen was incredible, earthy, and rich. When the dish was ready, I eagerly took my first bite. The flavor was intense, unlike any mushroom I'd tasted before. There was a slight bitterness that I hadn't expected, but I figured that must be part of the wild mushroom experience. I ate the whole plate, savoring every bite. It wasn't until a few hours later that I started to feel off. At first, it was just a slight queasiness, like the kind you get when you've eaten too much rich food. I tried to shake it off, thinking maybe I just wasn't used to wild mushrooms. But as the evening wore on, the feeling got worse. My stomach started to cramp painfully. I felt hot and cold at the same time, and a thin layer of sweat covered my skin. The room seemed to spin a little when I stood up. I tried to convince myself it was just food poisoning. Maybe the mushrooms weren't as fresh as I thought. But deep down, a growing sense of dread told me this was something worse. As the night progressed, my symptoms intensified. The cramping in my stomach became unbearable. I was alternating between bouts of vomiting and diarrhea. My vision started to blur, and I felt disoriented. That's when I knew I needed help. I managed to call for an ambulance. When the paramedics arrived, I could barely explain what had happened. The ride to the hospital was a blur of flashing lights and urgent voices. In the emergency room, doctors swarmed around me, asking questions I could hardly focus enough to answer. Through my haze, I heard words like toxicity and liver function. They asked about the mushrooms I'd eaten, but I could only mumble about the Instagram post. Someone mentioned activated charcoal. Needles pricked my arms as they started IVs. As I drifted in and out of consciousness, I overheard snippets of conversation. The doctors had seen several similar cases in the past few days. all of them linked to the same Instagram influencer. Apparently, the mushroom they had identified as safe was actually a highly toxic variety. The next clear memory I have is of a doctor explaining the situation to me. The mushrooms I'd eaten contained a potent toxin that attacked the liver. They were racing against time to prevent permanent damage. I learned that I wasn't the only one. Several other followers of the influencer had also been hospitalized. The Instagram post that had seemed so informative and trustworthy had contained a critical error. The influencer had misidentified a poisonous mushroom as an edible one. Their mistake had led multiple people, including me, into a life-threatening situation. As I lay there, hooked up to machines and IVs, the reality of what had happened sank in. A simple afternoon of foraging inspired by social media had turned into a fight for survival. The experience that was supposed to connect me with nature had instead shown me how dangerous that connection could be without proper knowledge. I'd been job hunting for months, sending out resumes and scrolling through job boards every day. It was exhausting and disheartening. That's why when I got a message on Instagram about a job opportunity, I was immediately interested. The message came from an account that looked like it belonged to a legitimate company. They had a professional-looking profile with posts about their work culture and employee testimonials. The message said they'd found my profile and thought I'd be a great fit for a remote position they had open. It was for a data entry job, something I had experience in. The pay they mentioned was really good, especially for a work-from-home position. They asked if I wanted to learn more, and of course I said yes. Over the next few days, I exchanged messages with someone claiming to be from their HR department. They sent me information about the company and the job description. Everything seemed legitimate. They even had a website I could look at which appeared professional and well-designed. I filled out an application form they sent me, including my personal details and work history. A couple of days later, I got another message saying I'd been selected for the position. I was ecstatic. After months of rejections and unanswered applications, it felt amazing to be chosen. They sent over a contract for me to sign electronically. I read through it, and while some parts seemed a bit vague, I was too excited to question it too much. I signed and sent it back. That's when things started to move quickly. They told me I needed to set up a home office with specific equipment they required for the job. They said they'd send me a check to cover the costs, and I should use it to purchase the items from their approved vendor. The check arrived in the mail a few days later. It was for $4,500, which seemed like a lot, but they had mentioned some expensive software I'd need. I deposited the check into my bank account. The bank teller didn't say anything unusual about it, so I assumed everything was fine. The next day, I got instructions from the company about how to purchase the equipment. They gave me the contact information for their vendor and told me to wire the money directly to them. I was a bit nervous about wiring such a large amount of money, but I reasoned that the check had cleared my account, so it must be okay. I went to the bank and initiated the wire transfer for $4,000 to the vendor's account. The remaining $500 was supposed to be my first week's pay. The bank teller asked if I was sure about the transfer, and I said yes, explaining it was for my new job. They processed the transaction. For the next few days, I waited eagerly for confirmation that the equipment had been shipped. I sent a few messages to the company asking about it, but their responses were vague. They kept saying it was being processed and I'd get a tracking number soon. I started to feel a bit uneasy, but I told myself that big companies often move slowly. Then, about a week after I'd deposited the check, I got an alarming notification from my bank. The check had bounced. My account was now overdrawn by $4,000 plus fees. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. How could this be happening? The money had been in my account. I'd seen it there. In a panic, I tried to contact the company. My messages went unanswered. I tried calling the number on their website, but it was disconnected. That's when the horrible realization began to sink in. This wasn't a real job. It was all a scam. I spent the next few hours in a daze trying to piece together what had happened. I looked more closely at the company's Instagram profile and website. Things I hadn't noticed before now seemed obvious. The employee photos were stock images. The testimonials were vague and didn't name real people. The website had no physical address listed. I searched online for the company name along with the word scam. My heart sank as I found forum post after forum post from other people who'd fallen for the same trick. Some had lost even more money than I had. It was a widespread scam targeting desperate job seekers like me. I learned that what had happened was called a fake check scam. The scammers had sent me a check that initially cleared because banks are required to make funds available quickly. But it takes days or even weeks for a check to actually clear. By the time the bank realized the check was fake, I had already sent the money to the scammers. The next morning, I went to my bank, hoping there was something they could do. The bank manager listened sympathetically but explained that I was responsible for the funds. Because I had withdrawn the money and sent it away, I now owed the bank $4,000. They suggested I file a police report, but warned me that in most cases like this, the money is gone for good. I filed a report with the local police and also reported the scam to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. But the officers and agents I spoke to weren't optimistic. They said these scammers are often operating from overseas, making them very hard to catch. As I sat in my apartment that evening, the full weight of what had happened hit me. I was now in debt, with no job prospects and feeling utterly foolish. How could I have fallen for this? I prided myself on being cautious online, but my desperation for a job had clouded my judgment. I thought about all the red flags I'd ignored, the job offer that came out of nowhere, the pressure to move quickly, the strange way of paying for equipment. It all seemed so obvious in hindsight, but at the moment my excitement had blinded me. The hardest part was telling my family what had happened. I felt so ashamed. They were supportive, but I could see the disappointment and worry in their eyes. I knew they were wondering how I could have been so naive. In the days that followed, I discovered just how widespread this type of scam is. I found online support groups full of people who had similar stories. Some had lost their life savings. Many were struggling with depression and anxiety as a result. It was a cold comfort to know I wasn't alone, but it also made me angry. How many people's lives were being ruined by these faceless scammers? I learned that the scammers often use real company names and logos, making their offers seem legitimate. They create elaborate backstories and use professional-looking documents. They prey on people's desperation and hope, using the excitement of a job offer to rush people into bad decisions. As I worked to figure out how to repay the bank, I couldn't stop thinking about how easily I'd been manipulated. The scammers had known exactly which buttons to push. They'd offered a solution to my problems, dangled the promise of financial security in front of me, and then used my own optimism against me. The experience left me feeling vulnerable and paranoid. Every email, every message on social media now seemed like a potential threat. I found myself second-guessing everything, wondering what other dangers might be lurking behind friendly messages or exciting opportunities. Hey there again. Hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to hit the like button and to subscribe to the channel. This will really help the channel to grow and you can be notified of the new videos. And I have something more for you. I chose another video for you to watch. Just click the card here to go to the video. Hope you like it. See you there.